CME on gastroenterology. Dr. Chandrasekhar Swake, Dr. Santosh, and Dr. Chikola, and respected delegates. We had a meeting on February 10th, regular meeting, and then we thought we'll have a special meeting on 24th, usually on the first Friday, third Friday, the other meetings are there. So I was discussing with Dr. Chandrasekhar Swake, so we'll have some gastroenterology CME, something which has not been, in recent days we had no CME related to gastroenterology. And he happily agreed. So the common topic, GRE, the selection of the topic is that it's a very common problem which everybody we face in our day-to-day clinics. It is so common that almost all the patients are one or the other proton pump inhibitors or H2 receptor blockade. However, the symptoms persist many of the patients. Is it a PPI failure or is something else, or it's a functional disorder? So today's CME is something on what are the advances with GRE, the diagnostics, how to come to accurate diagnosis and how to manage medically and surgically. And most of the time we get the ENT surgeons invariably make the diagnosis of reflux disease. When they do a direct laryngoscopy, they will find it is feature of GRE. So we have to talk about the medical management, the diagnostic and medical management. Dr. Chandrasekhar Swake, he is well known in the city of Mangaluru. He did his MBBS from KMC in the year 2000, April 2007. Then he did MD in internal medicine from Umbrella School of Medicine, and then he continued there and he did his DM gastroenterology in the same institution from August 2013 to July 2016. Later he underwent a fellowship in advanced therapeutic endoscopy, and he is the only one who has started doing this therapeutic endoscopy and endoscopic pancreatic procedures. Pancreatic endoscopic ultrasonography of the pancreas and procedures endoscopic. He was almost the first person to do that, this advanced technique. And he has worked as an emergency. Before that, he was also, I want to tell you that he is son of Dr. Jivaraj Swake, who is the proprietor of SAS hospital in Mangalore. He has done a lot of research on diagnostic accuracy and factors affecting UVS, endoscopic, FNA in patients with pancreatic cancer. So he has a lot of research papers. There are a lot of conferences he has attended, and he has given a lot of talks in CMEs. So he has also a community service, activities in community services, actively involved in Swachh Bharat initiative of Ramakrishna Mission Mangalore and Amala Bharatam programs conducted by the Mata Amritanandamayi Math Mangaluru that have created a cleaner and greener Mangaluru city. This is his extra academic, other than the academic interest. So also he is currently creating 4 Miyawaki forests in Mangaluru to increase the green cover, and these will contain around 25,000 trees and help in restoring the bird and insect population in the city, something which is laudable. And he is also well versed with the Carnatic classical music with over 10 years of training in South Indian flute, Venu, and the Mridangam, percussion instrument, under the guidance of renowned maestro in both art forms, represented by my school and college in various state levels. This renowned maestro in both art forms. And he's also he has represented, he has other industries swimming. He has participated in swimming competitions, football tournaments, and he's a living nature lover. Have personally planted over 1,000 trees in and around Mangaluru city. And he has got a large collection of ancient contemporary coins from all over the world. That is his personal hobby. So today he is going to speak on diagnostics of GRD and medical management. Then the another speaker is Dr. Santosh Kumar KV. He has introduced me, Dr. Santosh Kumar KV, in fact Dr. Chandrasekhar Surake. He is Professor of Surgical Gastroenterology at KSA Medical Academy and Hospital, Research Hospital. He has done his MBBS from JJM Medical College, Davangere, Karnataka, and MS General Surgery from Government Medical College, Ballari, Karnataka, and DMB Surgical Gastroenterology from Amrita Institute of Medical Sciences, Cochin. So he has he has worked as a senior consultant in surgical gastroenterology, hepatobiliary surgery at KSA Medical Academy. He's professor and a senior consultant. Currently, he is a senior consultant and is a professor of gastroenterology. His special interest is in advanced liver, pancreas, and gastric cancers. And he and his team perform all complex surgeries for gastrointestinal, liver, pancreas, gallbladder, and GI cancers. So they work as a team, Dr. Chandrasekhar Surake and Dr. Santosh KY. So Dr. Santosh KY will be elaborating and enlightening us on advanced surgical therapy for GERD. So with this note, I would once again welcome all of you, and also next month upcoming meetings which Secretary will elaborate. We will be having regular meeting on the March 10th, and also 12th we have a CME program on hematology. So welcome you once again. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. I would now like to welcome Dr. Chandrasekhar Surake to speak on the topic of diagnostic and medical management of GERD.
Warm good evening to one and all. Around a month back when Venugopal sir called me and asked me, did you talk on some topic? Spontaneously I said GRD, but I had a bad feeling about this, because I had a feeling that everyone knows everything about GRD, or at least everyone thinks they know everything about GRD, so we won't have much of an audience. But and I think I'm right. But I still, why did I choose GRD? See, I'm a totally person trained in therapeutic endoscopy. When I came here, I still remember I gave the first month after I reached here, I gave a talk in the ASI for advances in therapeutic endoscopy. It was well attended. We just spoke about the new thing, US, ERCP. We spoke about some very advanced procedures that we had just done. We were doing a lot of transgastric procedures, trying to avoid surgery, transgastric. We did a US guided gastro, duodenostomies and all this fancy stuff. And because I was very passionate about US. But last 4 or 5 years, this has been my, it's been like kind of an awakening where, see, therapeutic endoscopy is very nice. It's very, you feel very good about it. But most of these patients are terminal cancer patients. You do it for palliation many of the time. But there's something that I kept seeing over the last 4 years is two things that really became very dear to my heart are GRD and inflammatory bowel disease. Because GRD and inflammatory bowel disease affect literally everyone. It can be affecting children, it can be affecting pretty people, nonagenarians, octogenarians, and it causes severe morbidity. The quality of life is very poor, and a properly treated patient with either inflammatory bowel disease or GRD, it just transforms their life. So it's a proper treatment of GRD or IBD is a life transforming experience. And we've had this coming from our patients who come back to us telling they've not been eating for 20, 30 years, who've been having every day. I'm sure every one of us has experienced GRD, and I feel that multiply that 4 times and think of that happening every single day of your life. What kind of a quality of life are you having? So I think giving relief to, and the people who suffer from GRD people like me and you who are young, who are working and actively involved in their activities, and it's so debilitating. It compromises the quality of life. They can't focus on their work, and this is really that really transforms into not just personally better, their family lives, everything. It's really a life transforming experience both for the doctor and the patient. So and there's a lot happening in GRD. So it's not just TPI, there's a lot more happening to it. And world over a lot of research happening. Santosh will talk to you about. I'm very lucky I have a fantastic colleague in Dr. Santosh, and we've done some good work together, and he'll share his insights into surgical aspects of it. Dr. Satya is here, a young colleague of mine. He'll talk to you about the data from our center. So 4 years we've been doing manometry and pH. 1 year we can take it out. COVID, we were not doing it because of guideline recommendations to avoid doing these, as these were considered broadly as elective procedure. So we have 3 years of data to share with you on manometry and pH and how this has thrown a lot of light on what I'm quite sure what we would otherwise not being able to diagnose. It's a very strange day. Today the first patient who I treated with 24-hour impedance pH study came for a review. It's a very nice story. This lady, 60 years, she was referred to me by Dr. Samesh Padman, who is one of our GI surgical colleagues who was in KMC Mangalore those days. And Samesh had posted this patient for Nissen fundoplication, and he called me up and said, I heard you have just started doing this pH study. And I told him, look Samesh, honestly, I have not yet done a single case, we just started last week. So you asked to be the first patient, are you ready to take the risk? So I wouldn't claim to have a lot of experience. And Samesh said, no, let's do it. So we did the 24-hour pH study, and I was really shocked because all the values, and this is a lady, classic GRD, she has regurgitation, she has heartburn, she has been taking PPI, she claims to have partial response to PPI. So the logical thing was an endoscopy was done, didn't show anything. The typical non-erosive reflux disease, where you have treated with PPI, your endoscopy is not going to show anything. So we do a pH study, and it's an absolutely normal study. We find that the Demister score, which is one of the parameters, is normal. The total number of reflux episodes are just 10% of the cutoff. The symptom correlation, that is the number of times the patient pressed the trigger button and the patient had true reflux, was very less than 10%. So I called Samesh and said, I think this is a case of function heartburn, please don't operate on her. And we decided we put her on impermean, which is available under the name as Depsol or Depsonil. And today, 4 years, she is completely asymptomatic. So this is a case where we could tell the patient that you don't have true GRD, you have something else. We could treat her with the proper medications. So a positive study is very great. It tells us go in for surgery if you need, but a negative study is equally helpful. It tells us what to do. So these are a lot of things happening, and I don't think you would have known all this without the new advances that are happening. So without further ado, let me come to the topic per se. And why this topic? I said a lot has changed, but a lot of it remains the same. The diagnosis of GRD is still quite very much clinical. You are going to see a patient with the classic symptoms. You are all of us know how to diagnose it almost, and we almost always start them on PPI, and all those things are quite similar. But the newer changes, the newer diagnostic modalities, the newer therapeutic modalities, a lot of it is happening. There are some myths that pertain to GRD. It's important that these myths are busted so that we are going to be practicing more of evidence-based medicine and not anecdotal medicine in today's era. There's a lot of experience that we have. We would like to share that with you so that if you tomorrow come across a patient that you feel tomorrow that Warren's advanced workup that is happening in your city, you don't need to send them. Previously, I do remember when I came to Mangalore and doctors telling me that we had to send these patients to other places to get these tests, and so it's happening in our city. And also surgery for GRD is something that is it's an unmet need. It's very under-addressed. People never even think about it, but who needs it, when they need it, why they need it, Dr. Santosh will elaborate. Most of the talk is going to be focused on the ACG clinical guidelines for 2021-22, which was published in American Journal of Gastroenterology end of 2021. And if any of you are interested, we have a few copies of the guidelines. It's a fantastic guideline. I would say everyone should read this. Be he a medical student, be he a physician, a surgeon, anybody. Because all of us see GRD, and this will throw an enormous amount of light and all evidence-based. So this is what our topic will be on. So this is a very interesting quote that I heard some time back, and I think this I would hold this very close to me personally, because as a medical student or as a resident in internal medicine, GRD was all about PPIs for me. I would write PPI, and PPI didn't work. After a few weeks, I would probably send the patient for an endoscopy, and that was the end of story for me. Nothing more about it. But as we've treated more patients, as we've interacted with more people, as we've studied more about this, so much of information has come out. It's very humbling. It's very humbling because we come to know that how little we know about it. And I would say there is so much happening, and it's only because we came to know more, we could treat more accurately, we could do something better. So I believe that there's a lot more that meets the eye, and our knowledge is not just going to enrich our lives, it's going to transform the life of our patients. So this is what I wish that we all intend to share with you today. So coming to the topic per se, the definition of GRD largely remains the same: troublesome regurgitation and heartburn due to reflux of gastric contents. Now, very important, it's not just acid. A lot of people think GRD is acid. No, GRD may be acid, it may be non-acid. In fact, a lot of more trouble from non-acid reflux. More risk of Barrett's, more risk of esophageal cancer. So it's very important. This is where pH again comes in. pH studies tell us whether it's acid reflux, non-acid reflux. Your PPI is not going to work for non-acid reflux. So it's very important to know what is the true reflux that's happening there. If it's occurring more than twice a week, if it is debilitating, distressing and causing symptoms, then gastroesophageal reflux becomes reflux disease. And if it's persisting for more than 6 months, we have to use the term GRD. And if it's not responsive to PPI, single dose PPI, we put them on double dose. And if they don't respond to 8 weeks of double dose PPI, then they are labeled as refractory GRD. And then we have two new terms which are come under the functional GI disorder category: reflux hypersensitivity and function heartburn. And with more and more pH studies that we've been doing, we've been seeing a large population of patients who are having these entities, and they do not respond like the typical GRD, so it's important to distinguish these. So this is a chart of the symptoms of GRD. So you have the typical symptoms, and the typical symptoms are heartburn and regurgitation, we all know that. Now dysphagia has been mentioned as a typical symptom, but I would call it an alarm symptom. If you have a patient with GRD who is complaining of dysphagia, it's unlike the traditional deep try and try approach. Our approach is always early endoscopy because it may be a harbinger of cancer. So it's very important to understand. But we do see a lot of patients who do not come with typical symptoms. We see, as Sir mentioned, we see a lot of people, the ENT surgeons will be seeing a lot of patients who come to them with throat irritation, hoarseness, globus sensation, constant clearing of the throat. And we had a very interesting experience with this entity falls under the term called LPR, or laryngopharyngeal reflux. There is a term called laryngopharyngeal reflux disease that is considered to be a spectrum of GRD itself. It's certain factors are similar, but certain things are quite dissimilar. For example, there is a lot of thought that it may not be, it may be related to pepsin. There's some thought process that they do not respond very well to PPIs. So that's something that we've seen. We've seen that people with laryngopharyngeal reflux might do better with drugs like baclofen, etc. And some people also do very well with anti-reflux surgery. So we had a doctor, a very busy physician from Kerala, from Kannagad, who had presented to us with LPR. Very nice story, because he came to me and told me, I have LPR. And to be honest, this was one of the early days and I was not very familiar with this term. So I told him, let me go back to it. And his diagnosis was spot on. He said, these are my symptoms. I have read about in detail. And the reason why he came, and he was quite embarrassed to tell me this, was because one of his patients, an old man, came and told him, doctor, I feel really bad for you. All through the consultation that I've been seeing you for the last 1 year, you're always clearing your throat, coughing. You need to first take care of your health. So that was an eye-opener for this doctor. And he is a person who sees around 100 plus OPD per day. And that shook him up, so he decided to get evaluated. We had been taking PPIs with partial to suboptimal response. He had tried all the PPIs. He came to us even trying dexlansoprazole, which is one of the latest PPIs we were using. So we said, okay, you've done it, we'll do your endoscopy first. We had the ENT doctor with us when we did his endoscopy. And the classic symptoms of laryngopharyngeal, he had interarytenoid area, the edema, the swelling, all features. So the ENT doctor with us told us, yes, this looks like laryngopharyngeal reflux, this looks like GR related findings. He did not have much of, he had what we typically would call as NERD or NERD, that is non-erosive reflux disease, because he had been on years of PPI. So we put him off PPI, we did his pH study, he had all values 4 times upper limit of normal. He had an anti-reflux surgery and he's doing very well now, 2 years into his thing. So that is the LPR for you. So it doesn't respond very well to PPI PPI many times, but the patient, if selected properly, may get great relief from an anti-reflux procedure. A lot of patients come to us with asthma, Dr. Santosh, we have one of the cases that he will present is a lady who was treated as asthma for I think 3 decades with steroids and everything, and all that we did was we did an endoscopy and we found she had huge hiatus hernia, 8 centimeter hiatus hernia, half her stomach was in her thoracic cavity, and she was having such bad reflux and an anti-reflux procedure, and she's doing perfectly fine. So I think the diagnosis, understanding that not what that's more to what meets the eye. So something that may present to you as an innocuous asthma may be GI. So chest pain. So it's very important that what we do when we have patient presenting to us with chest pain, it's very important to rule out cardiac causes and not keep giving PPI. So we always try to make it a point, if we are having risk factors or they're suspecting cardiac disease, get them evaluated. Rule out the cardiac problem because that would be very hazardous, delaying that. And then if subsequently your cardiac workup is negative, then we evaluate further and then treat accordingly. So it's very interesting that some data from the US that says 6 million Americans with GRD also have asthma symptoms. So how much of that is true asthma, how much of that is GRD, it's very interesting. There's a lot more to be done. And probably PA studies will throw more light on this. I don't have Indian data on this. It's also very important to know that with chronicity, with long-standing symptoms, you are more predisposed to develop Barrett's esophagus, you are more predisposed to develop esophageal adenocarcinomas. So somebody who is developing these kind of symptoms as early as 20-25 years, probably twice both of it, they might have esophageal cancer. So it's very important to know. Also, the issue that is now cropping up, which I will touch towards the end of my topic, are the chronic use of PPI and what are the issues pertaining to that. I'll not deal much of the pathophysiology because Dr. Santosh will talk about it, but defective anti-reflux barrier, the Elias pleural diaphragm complex, typically like when you see in a hiatus hernia, impaired esophageal bolus clearance, and something called PSPW. That is, when we do PH studies, we are seeing more of this post-swallow induced reflux, post-swallow reflux induced peristaltic wave. So a secondary peristaltic wave must come in to clear the reflux bolus, and this is defective in many patients with chronic GRD. It's also found that transient lower esophageal sphincter relaxation is more in many patients with GRD, the PLESRs. Many of them might be having coexisting gastroparesis that may be contributing to the GRD. Decreased salivary production has been thought to add on to it, and esophageal hypersensitivity has also been thought to play a role. It's basically a complex interplay of more than one factor. Now, throwing light on these 2 new entities I mentioned to you, reflux hypersensitivity, this was recently introduced in the Rome 4 criteria for functional GI disorders. And it's a condition that's characterized by typical heartburn, very similar to your classic GRD. The endoscopy is normal. Endoscopic biopsies, you will always think of eosinophilic esophagitis. It's not an entity that we're not seeing. We have some 3 or 4 patients who have been diagnosed of eosinophilic esophagitis, so it's important to think of it when you have the endoscopic findings. But in this, your biopsies are going to be normal. Your pH testing is going to be essentially normal. But what's very interesting in reflux hypersensitivity is you'll find good correlation between whatever reflex happened and the symptom. The SI index might often be positive, which means the reflex is happening, that reflex is causing symptoms, but the symptoms are excess. The symptoms are out of proportion. So it's not, if the values most of the time in the pH study are going to be normal. So, and most of these patients, they are found that many studies that most of them are middle-aged women. Response to PPI may be unresponsive or partially responsive to PPI, and they, as per guidelines, they are best treated with neuromodulators like tricyclic antidepressants like triptone or amitriptyline or with the SSRIs. And only thing of interest is that unlike functional heartburn, which is a completely functional disorder, they do mention that certain patients have a role for PPI and for surveillance. So it's something like GRD is one end of the spectrum, functional heartburn is a complete other end of the spectrum, and somewhere in the middle you have reflux hypersensitivity. So functional heartburn, it's a functional disorder characterized by retrosternal burning and discomfort, persisting even after 3 months of optimal PPI therapy. Endoscopy is normal, pH studies will be normal. There is no role for PPI therapy, mainly managed with PCAs and SSRIs and psychotherapy, no role for surgery and management. So just to differentiate, as what I told you, GRD is excess acid causing symptoms, reflux hypersensitivity is normal reflux causing excess symptoms, functional heartburns are symptoms unrelated to reflux. So I will not spend much time on things, we'll go straight to management, and management is going to focus on 3 main things: diet and lifestyle changes, medical management and surgery, and in that order. In the very same order, because we often end up seeing an obese patient with a BMI of 30 plus in our OPD, giving them PPI but not counseling them about the other aspects like weight loss, diet, etc. So, very important diet and lifestyle. Weight loss for obese patients. A lot of studies have shown that even losing as much as 10% of your body weight can have enormous amount of benefit in resolution of symptoms. Very important, the typical don't have your meal just before your bedtime. It's very important. Give a minimum 2 to 3 hours gap before bedtime. Avoiding trigger foods like tobacco, products, smoking, certain foods that trigger, etc. I'll come to that later. And this head and elevation of the bed is something that again is very useful for patients who have nocturnal acid reflux. So what about weight loss? In some studies that show that if you have a patient with a normal, whose BMI was normal, and he gained 10% body weight and his BMI still continues to be normal, he can still have significant reflux. So it's not just the BMI that is high. Even 10% of weight gain, they found can cause significant reflux. One more study looked at people with BMI more than 30 and it found that it had nearly tripled the risk of GRD, developing GRD. And a study with 332 participants found that losing 10% of their body weight, that's what is shown in the chart, just with no pharmacotherapy, with no other intervention, just losing 10% of their body weight, they had complete resolution in 2/3 of the patients. In 15% they had partial resolution and in remaining there was no effect. So very important, counsel your patients. Make sure that when you see a patient in the OPD with GRD, check their BMI, counsel them about weight loss. Regarding what are the lifestyle, what are the foods that people need to make, this is all evidence based from the ACG guidelines 2022, and what is definitely recommendable is avoiding fatty meals, avoiding carbonated beverages. There is no strong recommendation to take decaffeinated instead of caffeinated. Citrus foods, they say that it depends. If you have a citrus trigger, avoid it. Having smaller meals is very helpful. Losing weight, very helpful. This alcohol has always been a very questionable thing, and in this study they found that the recommendation was individualized because certain alcoholic beverages caused it, certain didn't cause it. So they were not having enough data to strongly say anything. But in our practice, we largely found that patients, most of the time, we do counsel them to avoid alcohol because invariably we do find some trigger that's very difficult to isolatedly point out the trigger. So we, as a blanket, we do tell them, maybe it's better to avoid. Smoking, yes, absolutely, please stop. Avoiding exercise, particularly after a meal or even otherwise, can worsen your symptoms, particularly if you have hyperthermia. So definitely avoid strenuous exercise. Sleeping with the head end elevated is very helpful. And one more very important thing is, which you don't usually tell, is sleeping on the left side. So this is a chart that shows that when the right is wrong, just you remember this, sleeping on the right side is wrong. Sleeping on the left side is very helpful because when you sleep on the right side, the food tends to go more into the body antrum and then reflux straight into the esophagus. But sleeping on the left side, the food tends to go more into the fundus and the dependent area, and that causes less reflux. Also, using the head end elevation by around 6 inches of your bed is something that's very helpful. Or a lot of patients say that's not very practical, then at least recommend them to use a wedge pillow, like what is shown in this, wherein it's not just your neck that is elevated, but your entire torso that gets a little elevated. So these are certain simple measures that can cause enormous relief to patients. Regarding medical management of GRD, so PPI is still the mainstay of treatment. It's still preferred over antacids and H2 antagonists. Making sure that the patient is taking the drug, the PPI, properly, taking it 30 to 60 minutes before the meal. And if they don't respond adequately, then doubling the dose of PPI is recommended. Changing PPI is a controversial topic. What is recommended is change the PPI once, which means if you are having a patient on pantoprazole, maybe change it to esomeprazole. But if they do not respond either to both pantoprazole and esomeprazole, it's very unlikely they are going to respond to your third PPA. So then think about something else. They have also found that in different studies that adding something like a famotidine and H2 receptor antagonist is beneficial for people with nocturnal symptoms. For people who have a lot of postprandial symptoms, adding alginates and antacids is useful. For people who have a lot of reflux esophagitis, Cameron ulcers, etc., endoscopy, there's a recommend that mucosal protective agents like sucralfate can be tried. We are also having something new that's come out in the American market that's yet to make its presence in India. These are potassium competitive acid blockers, or PCABs. Vonoprazan is the drug that has been launched in the US. That's something that we're going to be looking forward to. Prokinetics like etopride, domperidone and levosulfuride might have select role in particular patients who have gastroparesis that may be adding to the GRD. Baclofen has been found to be beneficial in select patients where it's found to reduce the TABSRs. And what's important is once you treat with PPI, you have response, please look at maintaining the patient on the lowest possible dose of PPI for symptom relief. So this is a small slide about vonoprazan, the potassium competitive acid blocker. It does not need acid for activation. It's rapidly absorbed into the small intestine and accumulates in the canalicular membranes of the parietal cells, and it binds to the proton pumps in a potassium competitive manner. It's what the advantage of this is, PPI, when new proton pumps are produced, PPIs lose their effect. But vonoprazan does not lose its effect because it continues to bind to the newly produced proton pumps. Thus, it is more stable and it is able to act for longer duration and better than the conventional PPIs. So this is something that we will all be looking forward to. Now regarding some of the myths that you might have regarding GRD and busting them. So all GRD response to PPI, you already got some idea by now that up to 40% of patients with GRD do not respond to PPI. So it's very important. Now when they don't respond to PPI, that's almost close to half of the patients. So when you don't respond, what are we dealing with? Are we dealing with refractory GRD? Are we dealing with function heartburn? Are we dealing with reflux hypersensitivity? Second myth, GRD is a completely benign entity. Don't worry, treat it or don't bother about it too much. Leave it years together. People are on PPI sometimes 10 years, 15 years. No, there are a lot of issues both with the disease and the drug. So chronic GRD is well known to cause Barrett's esophagus and this may progress to esophageal cancer. So not something to be taken very lightly. Medical management is the end and all of management of GRD. Absolutely not true. From our personal experience, we found that if you select the patients properly, surgery can offer a cure. You can have patients completely cured of GRD not needing to take any PPIs. And PPIs are safe. So again a controversial topic, a lot of data coming in. Largely they are safe. They are pretty safe. But a lot of data coming in now is telling what are the side effects of PPIs, and it's very important that we are conscious about this. I will cover that in my last slide. And it's very important that unregulated chronic use of PPI is something that we should try and avoid. So this is wherein the further newer modalities are going to come into play to help us guide us about who goes beyond PPIs. So one slide on refractory GRD. When you think what could be the causes for refractory GRD? One is acid reflux that is still persisting, or it's not GRD per se, it's reflux hypersensitivity or functional heartburn. Or it's very important to think that many times people with esophageal motility disorders. We've seen this commonly in patients who have systemic sclerosis. They have a condition called scleroderma esophagus. And when we do manometry, we find they have absolutely no contractility of the esophagus. This is an entity called absent contractility. The peristalsis is absolutely zero. So these patients will be having a lot of motility associated reflux. So it's very important a manometry is rolled into that. Echinacea cardia, we had a lot of patients presenting to us, referred to us saying this patient has chronic GRD, we'll have to probably plan for an anti-reflux procedure, and then we've gone in and we've done the manometry and found they have severe echinacea cardia. Exactly opposite surgeries, right? For reflux, you want to tighten the LVS complex, for echinacea, you want to loosen it to the cardiomyocyte. So very important to understand what's happening there. So the approach is going to be for classic GRD as per guidelines, 4 to 8 weeks of PPI. If there is good response, well and good, you're done. Try to come down to the lowest dose and maintain and stop. You can always take it down to an H2 antagonist like famotidine or some SOS antacids and stop it. Now if you are having no response or suboptimal response, then try the double dose, and if you are still not having a response, then look at further tests like endoscopy, manometry, pH study, etc. Very important that at any point of time, if you have a patient coming to you with advanced symptoms like dysphagia, weight loss, hematolysis or persistent vomiting, it may be a neoplastic process like carcinoma esophagus, kindly recommend for early endoscopy. Don't wait for the 4 to 8 weeks. And when the doctor does endoscopy, what does he see? He typically, we have this Los Angeles classification, class A, B, C and D based on the size of the damage to the esophagus. So A is just small breaks that are less than 5 mm confined to the folds, B may be more than 5 mm confined to the fold, C may be involving less than 2/3 of the circumference of the esophagus but causing more significant changes, and D may be involving the whole circumference of the esophagus. And based on this, if it is grade C or grade D, it is diagnostic of GRD, and if you don't need to do pH studies, etc. You can almost, if you are, for example, planning this anti-reflux surgery, they can go ahead. Grade D textbook symptoms of GRD, this is again considered diagnostic, whereas grade A or normal esophagus is not diagnostic, it needs to be evaluated further. And then when we mean evaluated further, the pH study is what we next talk about. Dr. Satya will spend a little time on that, so I won't spend too much time. pH impedance study is broadly going to measure the amount of esophageal acid exposure or non-acid exposure, the amount of reflux episodes happening, and whether there is a proper correlation between the reflux and the patient's symptoms, which means the patient will be having a small computerized device, and when he feels regurgitation, he is supposed to press the trigger 1, and the device is going to be checking whether there is true reflux happening. So then they are going to try and make the correlation and see whether this is true GERD or not. And what are the indications for pH study? A patient who is having refractory GERD, 8 weeks of PPI not responding, an endoscopy that might be showing just LA or normal endoscopy, so you need to have more clarity. So such a patient, or a patient who is being planned for surgery, where you want to, the doctor, the surgeon needs to definitely know, like the first lady I spoke to you about, is you can't operate the patient with function heart, it will be disastrous. And as a part of pH study, we always do manometry in the first step. That is because it helps us diagnose the lower esophageal sphincter accurately and place our pressures at the pH sensor 5 cm proximal to the area. It's also having many other indications, but in GERD, the main role of manometry is diagnosing mimics of GERD like echalacia, characterizing the size of hiatus hernia and the type of hiatus hernia, seeing whether there are coexisting esophageal motility disorders that are present, and guiding the surgeon, telling him if there is absent contractility, we will tell them do a partial conductilization, etc. And also to help locate the LDS. So now this is the last slide coming to the major adverse effects of chronic PPI therapy, something that's coming up in a long way, in a big way, a lot of research happening, something that we should all keep our eyes and ears open to, because we've all been using PPI, we tend to add a PPI to most of our patients, but there are a lot of side effects. Cardiovascular could be blocking the endothelial production of nitric oxide, and it can have a lot of other dangerous effects. It can interact with clopidogrel and antiplatelet that we use. There's a lot of issues with idiosyncratic drug reactions progressing to chronic kidney disease. There's reduction of gastric acid can lead to increased amount of gut infections because the productive role of gastric acid is lost. Subsequently, this can lead to small intestinal bacterial overgrowth. Reflux of this into the pulmonary tree can cause pulmonary complications like pneumonia. There's also some thought that accumulation of cerebral beta amyloid can lead to dementia. There may be gastric acid reduction might compromise with calcium, may lead to calcium malabsorption. Over a period of time, it may progress to gastric atrophy and gastric cancer, vitamin B12 deficiency, hypomagnesemia. These are a lot of issues pertaining to chronic PPI use. So it's very important that you don't use blanket PPI therapy and chronic PPI therapy without a logical approach. And this is the last algorithmic approach which I have already told you. Give PPI, assess response, complete response, taper down and stop. No response, then look at doing an endoscopy, seeing whether they have reflux esophagitis. If the endoscopy is normal or there is no significant changes there, then look at adding on the pH studies and manometry and other tests, which will be spoken with the next speaker. Thank you very much. Please take questions if any at the end of the talk. We'll go to the next one.
Thank you, sir. Next, we have Dr. Satya to speak on 24-hour pH manometry.
Good evening everyone. I am Dr. Satya, working currently at SCS Hospital, Mangaluru. I would like to thank IMA and Dr. Chandrasekhar sir for giving me this opportunity. So what I will be covering in my presentation would be when to use esophageal manometry, when to use 24-hour impedance pH study, how is esophageal manometry and 24-hour impedance study done, and our experience at Institute of Liver and Gastrointestinal Disorders, SCS Hospital, Mangaluru. So this is an image of one of our technicians placing the esophageal manometry catheter in one of our patients. So what do you expect when you go in for an esophageal manometry test? So basically a lubricated catheter is inserted through the nose and is guided down to the stomach. Now the patient is placed in the lateral position, and then the pressure of the esophagus is measured, and then the patient is made to swallow sips of water and then the pressure exerted by the esophagus is measured. So when we do an esophageal manometry, we get a plot like this. The plot, basically the x-axis stands for time and the y-axis is the length of the esophagus. So the band on the top is the upper esophageal sphincter and the band below is the lower esophageal sphincter. And as the food bolus passes through, we can see the pressure changes in the esophagus. Now what are the clear indications for esophageal manometry? It is mainly used for evaluation of patients having dysphagia, especially after a normal endoscopic study. In patients having non-cardiac chest pain, in patients having chronic regurgitation, and before posting the patient for fundoplication in order to plan for surgery and to locate the lower esophageal sphincter. So with respect to esophageal manometry, it is very important to know that esophageal manometry is mainly used to assess for motility abnormalities associated with GERD. And it's also important to know high resolution manometry is not alone a diagnostic test for GERD. Weak lower esophageal pressure and ineffective esophageal motility often accompany severe GERD, but no manometric abnormality is specific. High resolution manometry also has the role in evaluation of patients considering surgical and endoscopic anti-reflux procedures, primarily to evaluate achalasia. And why is it important to evaluate achalasia? Patients with achalasia can have heartburn and regurgitation that are mistaken for GERD symptoms, and anti-reflux procedures performed for such a patient can have devastating dysphagia. As Dr. Chandrasekhar sir mentioned, it is a completely opposite procedure. So it is very important to do an esophageal manometry before posting a patient for surgery. Now once we do an esophageal manometry, we get a few variables, and these variables help us in diagnosing motility disorders. The first one, IRP, integrated relaxation pressure. So this is basically the pressure in the lower esophageal sphincter once the swallow has started. So at the bottom you can see IRP. Basically it is the IRP is measured in mercury. It's a box starting at the onset of the swallow and is drawn to the right until the distal end of the contraction wave, that is basically till the bolus reaches the gastric, till it enters the gastric. Next, coming to the distal contractile integral, the DCI, it is basically the pressure exerted by the esophagus on the food bolus. Distal latency is a measure of the peristaltic timing. The distal latency is the time in seconds from the onset of swallow to the central deceleration point. Also, to make it simpler, it is basically the time from when the swallow starts to the food bolus entering the stomach. Now, what we follow is the Chicago classification third version. So, basically, the variables that we spoke about, we use these variables in diagnosing various esophageal motility disorders. So, it's a hierarchical classification. First, we look at IRP. And if IRP is more than 15 mm of Hg, then we need to raise our suspicion regarding achalasia cardia. So in achalasia cardia, one more thing that you can see is the time taken for the food bolus from the start of the swallow to reach the stomach will be less than 4.5 seconds. So based on that, we can diagnose achalasia cardia. And in case the IRP is more than the normal, that is the resting pressure of the lower esophageal sphincter is more than normal, but achalasia is ruled out, then it can be a esophageal gastric jejunal outflow obstruction disease. And this outflow obstruction disease may be a mechanical obstruction, or it might be a patient that has undergone fundoplication and it has been a very tight fundoplication. So in the major disorders of peristalsis, another disorder that we see is a diffuse esophageal spasm. Basically, the pressure exerted by the esophagus on the whole is very high. So the value that we get is above 8,000, the total pressure. So then coming to the minor disorders of peristalsis, the two disorders that we are very interested in is ineffective motility and fragmented peristalsis. In ineffective motility, what happens is the IRP is normal, the resting pressure of the lower esophageal sphincter is normal. At the same time, the pressure exerted by the esophagus is very low. It is very low, less than 450. So that causes ineffective motility. Fragmented peristalsis. What happens is there is a break in the peristalsis, and this this break is measured in time in terms of centimeters. So when this length of the break in the peristalsis is more than 5 centimeters, that's when we consider it as fragmented peristalsis. Now just to brief about the data that we obtained from our hospital, a total of 177 patients underwent esophageal manometry in the last 3 years, and we noticed that the most common indication for the patients was dysphagia under evaluation, and among the 177 patients that we evaluated, around 50 turned out to have normal esophageal motility. The most common type of esophageal motility disorder was atresia cardia type 2, followed by ineffective esophageal motility and fragmented peristalsis. Another thing that we need to make note of is that atresia cardia type 2 and inefficient esophageal motility was, the mean age of the patient was 45. This is a tabular column describing all the esophageal motility disorders that we saw, and we can see that atresia cardia has the highest number of patients, followed by ineffective motility. This is a very important slide because what we noticed was in patients that were diagnosed with atresia cardia, the main presenting symptom was dysphagia, whereas the patients that were diagnosed with ineffective esophageal motility and fragmented peristalsis in the end, the symptoms were very similar to true GERD symptoms, that is regurgitation and heartburn. Moving on to 24-hour impedance pH study. We have already learned the importance of the pH study. Sir has already told how important it is to do it. So let's see how it can help us. Basically, the ambulatory reflux monitoring allows for assessment of esophageal acid exposure to establish or refute a diagnosis of GERD, and this is done by using a symptom index. What are the indications for pH study? Patients refractory to empirical PPI therapy, patients with reflux symptoms with normal endoscopy, preoperative evaluation for anti-reflux surgery. Now when it comes to pH study, there are two types of pH studies that are currently in place. One is the wireless capsule method. In this, a capsule is placed in the lower end of the esophagus using an endoscopic guide, and this capsule records the pH reflux. And the other one is the transnasal catheter monitoring. This is the more conventional method, and this is the one we currently use in SCS hospital. So here, a lubricated catheter is placed nasally up to the gastric, and this catheter, it has two sensors for pH and also measures the impedance. So now both these types of studies have their merits and demerits. The wireless pH study, the main advantage is it doesn't cause any physical discomfort, and it's not embarrassing to the patient, and patient can go on with their day-to-day activities. The wireless pH study can be undertaken for up to 72 to 96 hours, whereas the transnasal catheter-based pH study is limited to 24 hours. And the wireless pH study would also need endoscopic guide. And right now the transnasal catheter-based pH study works out cheaper. So in India the use of wireless capsule method is very limited. So this is how the pH monitor device would look. So the transnasal catheter is placed up to the stomach, and then the device is worn by the patient, and as you can see in the picture, and this is placed for 24 hours. So whenever the patient experiences a symptom, experiences a reflex, they need to press a trigger button. So that time the pH sensors will detect if there is any reflex taking place. So what happens is, it's a silicone catheter. It has two pH sensors, one in the stomach and one about 5 centimeters above the lower esophageal sphincter. And it has multiple impedance sensors. It also calculates the number of reflux episodes in the 24-hour period. It checks if the reflux was acidic or non-acidic. The non-acidic reflex can be bile, pancreatic juices, etc. And it checks for symptom correlation, whether when the patient triggered the device, did it actually have a reflux. What happens is, in functional reflux disease patients, they keep triggering the thing and experiencing reflux, but actually there was no reflux taking place at that time. So these are few variables that are assessed during reflux testing. Diminisher score is a composite score which measures the time that the esophagus was exposed to a pH of below 4 and what was the length of the longest episode of reflux. And coming to acid exposure time, it's the percentage of time in the 24-hour period that the esophageal pH was below 4. It also calculates the number of reflux events and also calculates symptom correlation. So using these 4 variables, mostly acid exposure time and diminisher score, we can come to a conclusion if it's a true jerk or not. Now our data from SCS hospital, about 110 patients underwent pH study, 48 being females and 62 being males. 61 patients were found to be positive true jerk GERD cases and 49 were negative. The most common symptoms were again heartburn, chronic regurgitation and vomiting. Now this slide shows the results and as well as the symptoms, the most common symptoms the patients presented with. So on the left we have the patients that were positive and on the right we have the patients that were negative. And it is very interesting to note that the symptoms that the patients presented with are very similar. Most of the patients had regurgitation and heartburn. So this is why it makes it very difficult to diagnose patients clinically. So if you diagnose a negative case as true GERD, then it's not going to be helpful if the patient undergoes surgery. So that's a major necessity for a pH study. Now coming to these values, these are the 4 variables. So we saw that the total number of refluxes, the average among the positive cases was 85 refluxes. So the patients on average had 85 refluxes in the 24-hour period. But in the negatives it was only about 38. And the symptom correlation, about 80% of the symptoms the patients experienced was due to a reflux. But in the negatives, it was only 13%. So 9 out of 10 times, the times when they experienced a symptom, there was no actual acid reflux taking place. This is just to brief about what we do at the gastrointestinal lab at SCS hospital. Apart from esophageal manometry and 24-hour impedance pH study, there is also endoscopic ultrasonography, endoscopic retrograde cholangiopancreatography, percutaneous transhepatic biliary drainage, upper and lower GI endoscopies. So with that, I would like to conclude and I would like to hand over to Santosh sir to brief on the surgical management.
Thank you, sir. Next, we have Dr. Santosh with surgical management of GERD.
Good evening, everyone. Respected members of the IMA, Dr. Venugopal sir, Dr. Archit, beloved members, dear friends and colleagues. Today I will be speaking about the role of surgery in gastroesophageal reflux disease. Actually, my task is made much easier by Dr. Chandrasekhar because he has already convinced you that there is a role of surgery. So my task is already made easier. Even that happens with our patients also. Most of the times the patients who end up for surgery with us, either it is gastroesophageal reflux disease or chronic pancreatitis or IBD or gastrointestinal cancers. Most of them are already counseled, convinced, and my task or our team's task is just to fix a date for surgery. So it makes a job much easier for a surgeon when they are already counseled by a colleague or a fellow professional. And another thing, like when we were studying at Abbakka, because I hail from Davangere, studied at Bellary and then Abbakka. Never imagined that I would end up in Mangaluru working together. Jokingly, when we were studying for the exams, I commented that I will come to your hospital and we can work together. Then when I left, I completed my stint at Abbakka and I was working in North Kerala at Kannur. And 2 years almost, are starting a department at KSAG Hospital as well as SCS Hospital. Would you come down? We have already a colleague in Dr. Praveen Bhatt, who is a gastrosurgeon, so we'll make a team. So it was a fortunate moment, and God must have been favoring us. I ended up in Mangaluru, and we have been as a team doing a reasonably good work, I would say. As you mentioned, gastrointestinal cancers that we handle, like pancreatic cancers or liver cancers. Most of the times, although we do a work which is maximum to our ability, most of them come back with recurrences, even the outcome is limited. Whereas benign diseases which are lifestyle limiting, which affect every day of their life, there is loss of work, loss of quality of life. Actually, it is the quality of life which we all aspire for. So these benign diseases like inflammatory bowel disease, gastroesophageal reflux disease, chronic pancreatitis, these are the diseases which will affect quality of life. So fortunately, we have been doing some reasonably good work in these areas. So today, briefly, I will discuss about role of surgery in gastroesophageal reflux disease, and how I will just discuss our brief, short experience with surgical patients. So this is going to be an outline of my talk. What is gastroesophageal reflux disease? Already he has extensively covered it during his talk. I would like to highlight the significance of lower esophageal sphincter, that is the esophageal lower esophageal sphincter, as well as the diaphragmatic pleural complex. So that is what has a role in gastroesophageal reflux as well as the surgical management. So is there a role for surgery? He has already made my task easier. Is surgery safe? I would like to highlight like what is the surgery we do, how we do it, and patient selection. Actually, I have started and highlighted it because it is the most important part or the most important thing that we discuss with each other. Many a times we argue with each other, but finally we consent that whether the patient should be taken up for surgery or not. Sometimes he refers a patient for surgery and I go back and tell him, boss, this patient I don't think I can give a benefit of surgery. Please, I don't think the patient, he or she will benefit from our surgery. So some of the times, majority of the patient, almost 30 to 40% of the patients, we have discussed with each other and we have not proceeded with surgery, and I think we are happy about it because we have been able to give whatever surgeries that we have done, we have been able to give better results with our patients. And patient selection, just I will discuss on it. And what are the surgical principles in brief? Just a couple of slides. And outcomes of surgery. What is the outcomes that is published in literature, and what are our outcomes in a couple of slides. And what are novel techniques or what are the future trends in anti-reflux procedures or surgery? So this is going to be a brief outline of my discussion. So definition already has covered. So troublesome symptoms and complications which result from reflux of gastric contents. It need not be gastric acid itself. It is reflux of gastric contents as well as duodenal contents, which I discussed, into the esophagus and beyond, into the laryngopharyngeal complex or into the oral cavity and beyond. And what is the incidence? How common it is? So all of us have suffered from GERD. Definitely we might have had our symptoms. As I said, just imagine these patients having it every day, limiting the quality of life. So what is the incidence? This is an Indian cross-sectional study published by Postgraduate Institute of Medical Sciences from Chandigarh. So the prevalence is 16 to 20%. So around 16 to 20% of the patients suffer from GERD at one time or the other. It may be manageable with PPI, it may be refractory, or it may require a surgical or a therapeutic option. So symptoms, again typical, atypical, extraesophageal, this is how it is classified. The most common symptoms will be heartburn, regurgitation. Heartburn due to reflux of acid and regurgitation due to reflux of the gastric and the duodenal contents. So this actually starts my topic of convincing you like what is wrong with the lower esophageal sphincter. Is there anatomical or a structural defect where a surgeon's role comes into play? Because as surgeons we are always used to close the perforations and remove the tumors, reduce the hernias. So that is what we are for. Like if there is an organic or a structural defect or an anatomical defect. So is there an anatomical defect or a structural defect in the lower esophageal sphincter? So what is the significance of this lower esophageal sphincter? It is a guard, it is a sentinel which prevents reflux of gastric acid into the esophagus. So it is a one-way traffic. The food and the drink should go in, but there should not be reflux. Although there are transient reflexes which are cleared by various defense mechanisms, that is the esophageal peristalsis, saliva, as well as the lower esophageal sphincter. But the main guard against reflux is the lower esophageal sphincter complex. So what is it? How do you define it? So it is a high pressure zone in the lower end of the esophagus. It is a high pressure zone at the lower end of the esophagus. What are its characteristics? So you can see here, a part of the esophagus should be within the abdomen. That is called as the intra-abdominal part of the esophagus. As intra-abdominal pressure is always positive, it closes the lower esophagus along with the sphincter complex. Whereas the part, if it gets into the chest, negative intrathoracic pressure, it keeps the sphincter open and leads to reflux. So where is it located? It is located in the distal 2 to 4 centimeters of the esophagus. Should be in the intra-abdominal location. What is the length of this lower esophageal sphincter? It is 2 to 5 centimeters. And what should be the pressure? It is 6 to 25 millimeters of mercury, and it is now taken as an integrated relaxation pressure which includes both the lower esophagus, muscles of the lower esophagus as well as the crural complex. So is there a structural or anatomical defect? So when you say that a lower esophageal sphincter complex is mechanically defective, so whenever an intra-abdominal length of esophagus or the lower esophageal sphincter is less than 1 centimeter. So just imagine this, if it is less than 1 centimeter, whenever we take food, there is effacement of the stomach, and this leads to opening up of this lower esophageal sphincter and there is a reflux. And the total length of this lower esophageal sphincter is less than 2 centimeters. As well as the lower esophageal sphincter pressure that I talked about, that is the integrated relaxation pressure, is less than 6. So these are the features which suggest there is a mechanically defective lower esophageal sphincter. So what is the most important among these three? What is the most common cause of mechanically defective lower esophageal sphincter? It is the inadequate intra-abdominal length. So you see here, if there is a hiatal hernia, the crural which are lax, the part of the lower esophagus, the GE junction as well as part of the stomach slides into the thorax. So this leads to loss of intra-abdominal esophagus. This is the commonest cause for the mechanical disruption of the lower esophageal sphincter complex and reflux of gastric contents or gastroesophageal reflux disease. So how is it diagnosed? As I said, it is a usually PPI trial, 8 weeks of PPI. Then off PPI, if the patient has recurrence of symptoms and doesn't respond to PPI, or if there are alarm symptoms like dysphagia, weight loss, or melena. So these are the patients who immediately go for endoscopy, or else it is 8 weeks of PPI trial, and those who recur or do not respond to PPI go for endoscopy. So what is the role for high resolution manometry? Like Dr. Satya has discussed regarding these two studies. But again, it is tailored to each patient when we do a manometry and when we do a pH study. Now for all GERD patients, we won't do a manometry or a pH study. Those who are medically treated, they are better off with proton pump inhibitors. Their symptoms are relieved. We don't require to do a manometry or a pH study. In patients who have a mechanically disrupted lower esophageal sphincter, a large hiatal hernia, and when we are planning for a surgery, a manometry is a must. Why, I will discuss it later, as already mentioned. It is to plan the type of surgery as well as avoid some surprises. There are 2 to 3 patients that I remember we have seen, and the symptoms are typical of GERD. If you see patient and the symptoms are very typical, and the endoscopic findings are also unequivocal. We can't arrive at a diagnosis, and we send it for manometry, thinking to get a manometry study for planning anti-reflex surgery. And out of the 10 to 12 villus myotomy that our team has performed, 2 to 3 patients Hiller's myotomy for achalasia cardia. 2 to 3 patients were surprises. We thought it is a GERD, but when we did a manometry, it is an achalasia cardia. So it is in the opposite end of the spectrum, as well as the treatment also differs. And if just imagine if you had died without a manometry and did an anti-reflex procedure, a fundoplication for a patient with achalasia, as that right term that was used, it is devastating both for the surgeon as well as the patient. So when you do a PH study, when we are in diagnostic doubt, so whenever we discuss and say the patient is not fitting in, he may not benefit from surgery, so finally we say, let's get a PH study done. If it correlates with the symptoms, he will get benefit from surgery. If it doesn't correlate, then it is functional. Better he or she is treated with the medications. So endoscopy he has described and how is it classified, Los Angeles classification. Grade C and D are definite evidence of gastroesophageal reflux disease, that is called as a erosive reflex. And again, what do you see in hiatal hernia as such? So there is a J maneuver retroflex view where we see a scope which is snugly fitting the esophageal lower esophageal sphincter, which is snugly fitting the endoscope, whereas in the grades 2, 3 and 4 you can see a large gap around the esophagus formed by the diaphragmatic pleura, which are very wide. So you can see the diaphragmatic hiatus. So this is a definite pointer towards a disrupted lower esophageal sphincter complex and diagnosis of GERD. So here you can see where we see a crural impression as well as a hiatus hernia. So again, depending on where is the G junction and where is the diaphragmatic pinch, again the sliding component may be less than 2 centimeters or more than 2 centimeters. Again, these all information we get when our medical gastroenterology colleagues do an endoscopy, so that to plan well a procedure for a patient. So again, one more very dreaded complication or progression of gastroesophageal reflex, that is Barrett's esophagus. What is it endoscopically? Any columnar mucosa in the esophagus is a Barrett's esophagus. Microscopically or histopathologically, you have to prove that there are goblet cells. What is its importance? So it is considered as a pre-malignant condition if untreated. So it usually progresses. There are classification, there are 2 varieties, like whether it is less than 3 centimeters or more than 3 centimeters. Short segment Barrett's less than 3 centimeters and long segment Barrett's is more than 3 centimeters. So it's a pre-malignant condition, untreated, progression to malignancy is 1% per year. Some of the publications, if you go through or read, this is the Barrett's esophagus is very, very prevalent in usually in Western population. That is why there is an increasing incidence of adenocarcinoma, when previously long ago we took the squamous cell carcinoma and the distal stomach, which was common, but it is the adenocarcinoma of the gastroesophageal junction that is more common now, and Barrett's esophagus may have a role in it, which needs to be which needs further research. So spectrum, it has been discussed in detail, but what from the surgical point of view, what we are interested in is, one is non-erosive reflex, endoscopy absolutely normal, and sometimes it may be erosive esophagitis, but most of them are on PPI before they come to endoscopy. So we make it a point to stop PPI at least 2 to 4 weeks before endoscopy. That's a must. Otherwise, most of these findings are masked. Most of the times we are seeing a large hiatal hernia reflex symptoms, but on endoscopy, esophagus appears normal without any erosive esophagus. So most of these are due to non-erosive reflex. That is the acid suppression by the PPA leads to healing of all these erosions. So most of the times when we ask the patient to come for endoscopy, they must be off PPA for 2 to 4 weeks at least. So erosive reflex disease as they are classified. Barrett's again. Barrett's usually during endoscopy, biopsy is done whether to say there is a low grade dysplasia, high grade dysplasia, or a esophageal adenocarcinoma. High grade dysplasia again is a precursor for further problems. So these patients have to be under close follow-up and counseled. So medical management as a lifestyle diet and PPA trial, double dose PPA, maintenance PPA as I discussed. How long to take? Most of the patients, they take over the counter. They have been taking PPA for 10 years, 20 years. We really can't say. And long-term PPA use, is it safe? A lot of research has come out, but again it is controversial with conflicting evidence. At present, PPA usually is considered safe, but we don't know what the further research will throw up. So with this, maintenance dose of PPA, should we think of an alternative? Is there an alternative? As I have already highlighted, there is definitely an alternative because there is an anatomical or a structural defect which can be corrected by surgery. So GERD severity, the severity of gastroesophageal reflux correlates well with the altered mechanical feature, that is a large hiatus, lower esophageal junction in the sliding component of the hernia, lower esophageal junction migrating into the chest. So there is an altered anatomy and a structural component which can be corrected. So surgery might have a role and it may be an alternative to few patients, few well-selected patients whom we might benefit. And one more thing as discussed, the proton pump inhibitors of the anti-secretory medications, they will reduce the acid definitely, but will they prevent reflux? So as we mentioned, non-acid reflux or the gastroduodenal reflux, which is more dangerous. So this paper published in a reputed journal, that is Annals of Surgery, way back in 1995 from a very good center. Mixed reflux of gastric and duodenal juices is more harmful because they were finding that the esophageal adenocarcinoma at the GE junction is increasing. So when they studied this, they came out with this paper. Is the need for fundoplication or the surgery re-emphasized? Because this fundoplication surgery or surgery for anti-reflux has gone through the ups and downs. Previously it was in the open era, there were a lot of complications, no PPIs, patient selection was difficult, lot of complications with open surgery. Then with the advent of PPA, almost it went down till there was no much progress in anti-reflux surgery. But again with the advent of minimal access surgery or laparoscopic surgery, again there is an uptrend. So in a well-selected patient, definitely it can give a benefit. So they were of the conclusion that, as we highlighted the non-acid reflux, because the duodenal contents are at a pH of 4 to 7, the bile acids are activated. So when they come into the esophagus, rather than the acid itself, this gastroduodenal reflux is more harmful to the esophagus, leading to further progression into Barrett's or malignancy. So definitely, I think you might have been convinced by now there is an alternative because the anatomical defect, that is the lower esophageal sphincter and the hiatal hernia, needs to be corrected. Is there a safe, time-tested surgical procedure? Yes, it is. It is Nissen's fundoplication. It has been there for many decades, previously in the open era, but we have good data over the last 30 years in the minimally invasive or laparoscopic era, where it has withstood the test of time. So laparoscopic, it is minimal morbidity and acceptable complications, and it gives better quality of life, reverses Barrett's, and most of the patients, 85 to 90%, in well-selected patients, in short term, at least 3 to 4 or 5 years, they are off PPA. So what are the indications? As I have highlighted already, patient selection. We refuse more patients than we take up for surgery that come to us with GERD symptoms, and we have no qualms about it. Well-selected patients definitely do well. It is a satisfactory work for both the clinician, surgeon as well as the patient. So GERD responsive but not completely eliminated with PPA. Anybody gets a response to PPA and they intend or they are the candidates for surgery, they are the best candidates because it definitely proves that if you eliminate reflux, then there is an improvement. As I said, heartburn and regurgitation. Heartburn can be eliminated by PPAs, but regurgitation cannot be. So again, volume regurgitation is the indication for surgery. So well-documented reflux events causing symptoms such as chest pain, cough or wheezing, as I highlighted regarding the respiratory complications, or GI complications such as very bad erosive esophagitis can cause peptic strictures, varix esophagus, vocal cord injury, and some patients they desire to stop chronic PPI usage, that is who are on chronic PPIs, especially young patients who are working out, who are abroad, planning to go to other countries, where getting a PPI is very difficult compared to our place where over the counter they are available, and they are worried about side effects of PPIs as well as quality of life issues and the cost involved. But as I said, exclusion, we go all out of the way to prove that the patient can get benefit from surgery, and the functional dyspepsia or the functional heartburn patients are excluded. There is no benefit or no role for surgery in such patients. So anti-reflux surgery, what are the patient expectations? The patient expects miracles, but surgeons can only deliver what is possible by him. In well-selected patients, 85 to 90% are off PPA in the short term, and 75% are off PPA in the long term. The data of 10 to 12 years. And patients do have temporary dysphagia, sticking sensation, all that then settle. Some have early stability, and there are, of course, with any procedure, surgical complications. And what are the principles of surgery? So it is usually done by laparoscopy. First we define the hiatus, mobilize the esophagus so that we get a good length of esophagus in the abdomen, and hiatal hernia is repaired, the crura are repaired, and we create a new wall, that is a wrap or a fundoplication. So this is the operative image where hiatal dissection is done. You can see the arrows which shows defect in the hiatus. The esophagus is retracted, and this is sutured by a non-absorbable sutures with a couple of, some patients we use 2 stitches, some patients we use 5 stitches depending on the size of the hiatus. It is always not too tight so as to avoid dysphagia. We use a esophageal bougie, that is 32 front esophageal bougie is inserted, and over the bougie this repair is done so that the wrap is not too tight and there is enough for esophagus to distend during peristalsis. So after the hiatal repair, it is fundoplication to create a new wrap or a wall, and the wrap is created with the fundus of the stomach. Fortunately, anatomy is such that there is excess fundus which can be wrapped around the esophagus, and again this wrap should be floppy. It is called as a floppy niscence. The word itself defines floppy. It should not be too tight. It should be floppy so that there is no dysphagia, and fix the wrap to the diaphragm so as to avoid complications. There are some complications associated like the slippage of the wrap or the migration of the wrap. To avoid these complications, we fix it to the diaphragm with the sutures. So as I said, niscence is a 360-degree fundoplication, that is over the lower end of the esophagus we wrap the fundus of the stomach. There are some patients who, as in esophageal motility studies have described, there is an ineffective esophageal motility, severe problem with the peristalsis itself of the esophagus because of this chronic GERD. So in those patients, sometimes we tend to go for a two-way fundoplication where a part of the esophagus is not covered so that to reduce the chances of dysphagia, because these patients tend to have more dysphagia because of the problem with the esophageal peristalsis. But the results are equally good. There is slightly higher incidence of PPI usage post-surgery in these patients. But that is a bargain that we get for a patient who would otherwise end up in a dysphagia and chronic headache. So what are the surgical complications? As I said, the RAP might go into the chest, that is called as the herniated fundoplication, again losing the surgical benefit whatever we do. Or it may slip down, instead of on the esophagus, it may slip down to stomach and again it doesn't work. And if the hiatus is not repaired properly, it may cause a paraesophageal hernia. And the malposition, again, it is a technical failure where the RAP is on the stomach and again it leads to devastating complications. This is a short video with time permits. I'll just go ahead with it's a 1-minute video. Yeah. So it's not a good quality video, sorry for that. But this is the hiatal dissection, where we are dissecting the hiatus laparoscopically, so that the esophagus is freed from the surrounding attachments. That is the peritoneum, esophageal membrane. This is the esophagus that is being dissected, and the esophagus is lifted up. You can see the crura, the left and the right crura, and the gap in between. Behind pulsating is the aorta, and inside it is bougie, so that I can do. It is a sizer to make the hiatal repair thick. So we are just suturing the hiatal defect. Nothing is removed from there. Just it is a dissection and repair. So this is the hiatal repair where we are approximating the right and left crura of the diaphragm, so that hiatal repair is done. So these are 2-3 sutures that we have put. Just you can see, we have kept a small gap below the esophagus. We don't do it tight. So this is the Nissen fundoplication, where the fundus of the stomach is wrapped around the esophagus. So make sure that it is on the esophagus and not on the stomach. So a couple of slides about our patients whom I think both of us have seen. This girl, actually she is a BDS student from Kolkata. Very severe reflex symptoms. She gave palpitation to both of us even before diagnosis, after surgery, but she is doing well. We are happy about this girl. So she has a grade 4 hiatal hernia. You can see over here. You can see around the scope there is a large gap. Post surgery, 1 year, we have done Dr. Chandrasekhar did a endoscopy. So you can see the lower esophageal sphincter, the stoma-columnar junction is well maintained, there is no herniation. And you can see nicely the wrap around the esophagus. What we have taken the fundus around the fundoplication, you can see the wrap nicely seen. It is snugly fitting the esophagus. It is a delight to see this. It's happy for a surgeon as well as if the patient has responded well for this procedure. Again, one more patient, one of the earliest cases that we have done, he already mentioned about her, 72-year-old lady, came with melena, treated as asthma for around 4 decades, and she came with melena. And one of the complications of this gastroesophageal reflux disease or hiatal hernia is Cameron's ulcers, which can bleed. So most of the stomach is in the chest. Just you can see behind the cardiac, the whole of the stomach, the fundus, the body is in the chest. And fortunately, she did very well with surgery. And the interesting part about this is, it was next her sister, a couple of months back probably. She had severe aspiration pneumonia due to gastroesophageal reflux. She was on a ventilator, recovered, operated by one of my surgical colleagues. Again, he had examined her, again detected to have a large hiatal hernia, and she is doing well. And another sister again, he has evaluated, and she has a gastroesophageal reflux. I don't know whether there is a correlation, but this is the tale of 3 sisters. when we, I think, took care of for surgery, I was very hesitant. It was one of the initial cases because even in Amrita, when we worked together, we did not have much exposure to this GERD or IMA hernia. She was just telling me, even when they were doing endoscopies, I think they do around 40 or 50 endoscopies every day. But as surgeons there, we were not doing enough cases for the GERD. Hardly we might have, over my 4 years there, we might have done around 8 cases. But I'll just share my short experience. And long-term results, evidence, again, these are the major studies that have been done. 10 years, most of them are satisfied with surgery. 90% of PPA at around 3 to 5 years, and around 70% are off PPA at 10 years. So refractory heartburn, I will not just, we have discussed this, I will not go into details of it. So what are the American gastroenterology guidelines? As I said, it is a very nice article. So what they have said? They recommend anti-reflux surgery for severe reflux esophagitis, that is grade C and D. Say grade C and D. It is proven. Grade C and D, there is a reflux. Either it can be treated medically or surgically. If they don't respond to PPI or it is refractory, then we go ahead with surgery. Again, manometry is a must before surgery. And large hiatal hernias, as I said, there is anatomical defect. And persistent troublesome GERD symptoms or complications like peptic strictures, barracks, esophagus, these are the indications for surgery. This is a strong recommendation and moderate level of evidence. Further studies are required to get the level of evidence to a higher level. So our experience, we have operated on a total of 43 patients, 24 were male and 19 were female. So average age was 35 to 40 years, as I rightly mentioned, most of them are in the most productive years of their life and with a restricted quality of life. And 43 patients, 39 patients we did nasal fundoplication, that is a 360-degree wrap, and in around 4 patients we have done a 2-pay fundoplication depending on his findings or his feedback that there is a restricted esophageal mobility or motility and absent peristalsis. In those patients we have done a 2-pay fundoplication. So immediate post-op, again most of the patients complain of dysphagia, sticking sensation in the throat. So all these are settled. Fortunately, we have not had any severe complications because most of the surgical steps are standardized by now. And follow-up, as you know, the follow-up of our patients, sometimes it's on WhatsApp or by call, sometimes our postgraduates call them, like how they are doing. Around 34 to 35 patients are off PPA. Occasionally, like every gastritis, they will require PPA. And 4 patients, they have symptom relief, but they are on maintenance dose of PPA. And 1 patient still complains of discomfort, inability to belch. He asked for endoscopy again, probably has not come back. So whenever most of them have our numbers, they call us if they are symptomatic. And 3 have not followed up, some of them are in Gulf. But definitely once somebody has undergone surgery, anything from head to toe, if there is any problem, they will definitely come back to a surgeon attributing it to the surgery that we have done. So newer techniques, just last 2 slides. Novel techniques, one is magnetic sphincter augmentation. That is a links reflex management system. So they have come out with this magnetic beads. These similar to the anti-reflux surgery, you dissect the hiatus, free the esophagus and just put it around the esophagus. So that is done laparoscopically. Again, more than 10,000 procedures have been performed in US alone. The results are good, but one disadvantage is patients cannot get an MRI done with these magnetic beads. The second is there is always a risk of migration, erosion into the esophagus. But this is easy to reverse. Again, going laparoscopically, cut the ring and take it out if they are having dysphagia. So again, this is a novel technique, maybe a future trend in years to come. And one more novel technique, it is without surgery, like endoscopy. So we were just discussing. He said, you have to take it up. Then I said, no, it's your domain. So it is transoral. Just create a new wall with this device. It has a stapling device. Create a new wall so that there is a protruding wall into the stomach, which will prevent reflux. So novel techniques again. There is no ACD guidelines or recommendations, but these are the things of the future. It may be within a year or within the next 10 years. We definitely don't know. But these are the two novel techniques that are having a promising results. So just to summarize, as highlighted by all of us, GERD is a common clinical problem with a high prevalence. It affects the quality of life. Relatively young patients with a problem with the quality of life, just imagine having a heartburn every day. So medical management is still the mainstay of treatment. If they respond to the proton pump inhibitors, a trial of PPI, double dose PPI, or a low dose maintenance PPI, still it is acceptable. But there are few patients, well selected, well counseled, who benefit from surgery. For them, definitely there is a surgical option with minimal morbidity, minimal complication. Is there a surgical procedure which has withstood the test of time? Yes, definitely. Anti-relapse procedure of Nissen fundoplication. And in well-selected patients, symptom relief, and it gives a better quality of life. Actually, it is the quality of life that everyone aspires for, and we may be an instrument in providing them this. Thank you. Thank you for
Thank you, sir. I will now request all the speakers along with Dr. Venugopal and Dr. Arjun to occupy the dais. The forum is now open for any questions.
The magnets which are close to the chest. Any complications related to that?
Yeah, I got a question, sir. Probably we all have doubts during the initial phases of these novel techniques like magnets being used. But it has been in use since 2007 or 2004, I think. And there is a trial which has been done from 2007 to 2017, almost 10 years. And those 9,500 patients have undergone this procedure. So probably it doesn't cause anything from the external factors, like if it is close to the chest or if any external component comes into contact. So it might not have any problems with that. The thing about MRI, again, it is not MRI compatible. Second, the thing about erosions, there is a risk of erosion. But probably being close to the chest probably doesn't have any problems. Again, further research is required. All these novel techniques, most of the times they come with time, they fade away. So a surgical procedure always, it should withstand the test of time, because there are thousands of procedures which come for 2 to 3 years. They are highlighted by the marketing teams or the companies, then they fade out. So finally, the techniques which stand the test of time will progress.
Thank you, sir.
Question is for Abhishek for a comment also. Most of the time we physicians see these patients with influenza infection. They come with a respiratory tract infection, then after fever, pain, everything subsides, and this lingering cough for a long time. That's when we refer this patient to a ENT doctor. My experience is I have a renowned ENT surgeon in my clinic, polyclinic. So So invariably it is a reflex features, what you call laryngeopharyngeal reflex. But they will book on these proton pump inhibitors. When you call refractory GR, so what is the time duration? Is it for 2 to 3 months of PPI inhibitors, or what exactly? When you say the patient has got a refractory GR?
So refractory GRD, the definition is very clear. It's double dose PPI for 8 weeks. You give them double dose PPI for 8 weeks. If they do not respond adequately, they are labeled as refractory GRD. This is the latest definition, at least as per our ACG guidelines.
These patients should undergo endoscopy and
Yes, yes, sir. That's as Dr. Santosh said. Generally, a patient can be off PPI. Many of them, we stop the PPI. Even for the PH study, the biggest challenge we find is we tell them to be off PPI for 1 week because we want to know what is really happening. Many of them struggle to be off PPI for a week. In that case, where they can't be off PPI for a week, we do on PPI mode, where the metrics come lower. The order class episode may be 73 off PPI, maybe 48 on PPI. So there are slight adjustments in the software. But most of these people who went for surgery were people who had refractory GRD and they were just struggling to be off PPI. So,
Thank you.
Who are the patients for whom you select to add a proteolytic agent along with the PPI? And between the choices of domperidone and levosulfate, how often do you see any movement disorders being precipitated by the levosulfate?
very valid question. The use of at least as per guidelines, they are very clear that they talk of PK, they don't talk of prokinetics, and prokinetics are largely recommended for people who have coexisting gastroparesis. Like typical population may be a diabetic for a long time who is having diabetic gastroparesis, who subsequent to that gastroparesis due to an endoscopy after 8 or 12 hour overnight fast, you find a lot of food residue in the stomach. And this patient is complaining of GRD, is having reflux esophagitis. Definitely we will consider adding prokinetics in such patients. When you are not having evidence of gastroparesis, there is no strong indication because there is very limited role for the prokinetic on the esophagus. So in those situations, there is no strong clear-cut guidelines to add a prokinetic. Many times when we see suboptimal response to plain PPI, we end up adding prokinetic to see whether the response is better. That is one thing. The next thing about levosulfuride, and so I personally like etopride hydrochloride, because it does not cause blood-brain barrier, it doesn't have this side effects of the movement disorders. I also try to refrain from using the combination PPIs, which is very common in India, which is not recommended anywhere else. Even in the West, PPIs, or if you look at people, your patients who come from the Middle East, they always have a PPI like an Nexium, and they have domperidone separate. They don't have these Razo-D, Pan-D, Razo-L, and that Razo-L and that pantoprazole with levosulfuride is pretty dangerous because it is 75 mg of levosulfuride, and you end up giving it twice a day. And I realized the side effect of it when I accidentally had GRD sometime back, and I couldn't find any other PPI, and I badly needed to take one, and I took a double dose of that. And that levosulfuride makes you very fatigued, you feel very drowsy, and movement disorders. I have seen few patients in my very early days of practice. I had used this levosulfuride combination, and I completely stopped using the double dose after I saw this movement issues. Typically, you have the dystonia, the akathisia, and all those things. So what we generally like to do is, but levosulfuride works as a charm for patients with reflux hypersensitivity. Your etopride doesn't work like that. So we use the 25 mg of levosulfuride standalone separate once or twice or thrice a day, and we find it works very well. So we don't go with the combination of PPI because it becomes 150 mg of levosulfuride if you give it together. So that would be my recommendation for my practice.
Any role for probiotics in functional disease?
There is some data coming up, but for example, there is some Danish study that studied lactobacillus reuteri in patients with dyspepsia, in patients who are having H. pylori, etc. And they said it helps in creating For H. pylori, I do remember them telling it helps in creating micro aggregates of H. pylori and it can be used along. I have not, there may be some data out there because that's a challenge of gastroenterology. That's one reason why these CMEs are useful, because there's so much happening that even as gastroenterologists we find it very difficult to keep pace. Because gastroenterology itself is now gone into gastroenterology and hepatology separate. Now under gastroenterology again you have IBD has become a completely different area. GI motility has become a completely different area. Somebody in the West, if when I was in the West, I was there for a short duration, we had GI motility guy will not come into IBD. IBD guy will be a totally different team. Pancreatic will be a completely different team. So there's so much happening. So honestly, I'm not very sure about the latest data, but there have been people who have studied it. I only know about it, it's used in H. pylori. Functional dyspepsia, I don't have much information.
Thank you, sir. I will now request Dr. Venugopal to hand over a token of appreciation to Dr. Chandrasekhar. Thank you, sir. I will now request Dr. Archit Borod to hand over a token of appreciation to Dr. Chandrasekhar. We would like to request Dr. Satya to come up to the dais and Dr. Venugopal to hand him a moment. Thank you, sir. I will now request Dr. Archit Borod to present the secretary report and the vote of thanks.
A little bit of time, I'll just finish a little quickly. The executive committee meeting, which was held on 10th February, 2 points that have been of importance is the GST for membership. IMA Central has advised that we have to take GST on the IMA membership of 15%, and that would be a burden on to the total membership fees that is going to be collected from February 1st onwards. And we discussed it with our CA, and the CA told that if the collective decision is done by the various branches of the states, they can take a call on it. And today we have got a clarification from state IMA that we are supposed to take the GST on the percentage of the money that is going to the central IMA. So central IMA, I think of the 17,000 odds what we are collecting, 11,500 goes to the central IMA. So the GST has to be taken on that, and that's the circular we have got from the state. So I think the membership fees will be a little higher because we will have to add around 2,500 more for the central GST. This is a lifetime membership, but that's been the rule, and all over IMA Central has told this has to be done. The other thing that we had is the upcoming events which we will be discussing. About the last one, we had the CME, sorry, this one beginning, we had the CME in the beginning, we had from Metropolis and Dr. Guru Prasad and the team from Metropolis did give us talks on that day. We had a camp at Kalyan which was well attended. Dr. Venugopal sir, myself and Dr. Soumya was there, and we had nearly around 170 people attending and almost 60 blood donations we got. We have no specific member achievements for this. Upcoming events, we have the Women's Doctor Wing event that's coming up on the 8th of March. That's the first event for next month that's coming. And this event is exclusively meant for women doctors only. It's a request. I cannot put it on the group saying that it's for women doctors, but then I requested. This is an event meant for women doctors only. IMA is having meeting. The regular IMA meetings are there for all of us, including the women doctors, but this is specifically for women doctors. We will have the monthly meeting on 10th of March, that is Neurology CME, Dr. Raghvendra will be addressing this on TI, and the event that's We have a day-long CME that's organized on 12th of March, and this will be tentatively attended by our state president. He's yet to confirm, but the topics have been finalized. We will be circulating the brochure shortly by another 2-3 days, and the registration details will be there. The all-awaited annual sport event, which was supposed to have happened day after it was scheduled, but unfortunately we have exams coming up in all medical colleges and faculties are involved with that, so we had to postpone it by actually 2 months. So April 24th is the date that has been finalized. I think all events will get over prior to that, and we have these events that is going to be there, the cricket tournament and the throwball and shot put tournament. One more thing that has been, we just got it today morning, the World Health Day celebration. This is from the Central IMA. They have told on 7th of April 2023, all local branches at district levels have to conduct a general body meeting on that day, and it has to be observed as something called as Samarpan Divas. This is to acknowledge whatever the services has been done by medics and paramedics during the COVID and other things. So they are going to send us a oath which will have to be taken in all the IMAs, and then we're supposed to invite public, local leaders and social opinion makers to the meeting, and possibly they will have to give their inputs towards that. So we will get clarity on this from the state also, but I think tentatively we will have the meeting. This is the first Friday. This will be 7th of April, will be the first Friday. We will try to adjust our second Friday meeting to the first Friday if possible, so that we could have a common meeting with the general body. That's the plan for this. So these are the main events that we have. As far as I will just continue the vote of thanks for today's session, I profusely thank our speakers, Dr. Chandrasekhar Saraki, Dr. Santosh Kumar, as well as Dr. Satya, who have enlightened us on the topic of gastroesophageal reflux disease. We have this meeting which has been sponsored by the Zuventus Pharma. We have our representatives from the Zuventus Pharma. I thank them profusely for that. We've had a wonderful discussion regarding this and the questions. I thank all the members who have come here and has participated in this meeting. I thank Dr. Adya for emceeing this consecutively. She's been doing it for the last 2 months. I thank the media person, Abbakka TV and others here, and the office staff of IMA, also common caterers for the food that we are going to have in some time. It's national anthem.
जनगण मन अधिनायक जय हे भारत भाग्य विधाता पंजाब सिंध गुजरात मराठा द्राविड़ उत्कल बंगा विंध्य हिमाचल यमुना गंगा उच्चल जलधि तरंगा तव शुभ नामे जागे तव शुभ आशीष मांगे गाहे तव जय गाथा जन गण मंगलदायक जय हे भारत भाग्य विधाता जय हे जय हे जय हे जय जय जय